So I'm starting to feel some very slight sensitivity to other senses other than the obvious ones. And it's very hard to put into words what they are. It feels like sort of like being in a room that you know that's where all the lights are turned on. You sort of know where everything is, but you're sort of feeling your way through. It's almost these sort of very subtle currents that I can feel myself getting pushed aside or pushed or pulled in one way or another, and it's and it seems like there's other things going on than my five senses and just my thoughts.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, other than just simply noticing, whether or not there's anything I can do, or, well, anything I can open myself up to that will allow these senses to become more obvious. Or
just
apparent.
Feel it, play with it, trip on it. There's literally endless dimensionality of experiential presence. All of which ultimately is completely uncharacterizable. But we pretend we can kind of pseudo-characterize our sensory experience, but the rest of it is, all bets are off. I mean, it's,
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, but there's no limit. There's literally no limit to how much of it there is. And as you become more and more sensitive to it, you notice and realize that you've actually always been experiencing that. It was just below a threshold of interest for you because you couldn't qualify it as anything. It didn't seem to be an event that was relevant in life, and so you sort of censor it from the conscious awareness. I mean, this is. You probably heard me use the sort of the paradigm or the model of that realization is having the barrier between conscious mind and the unconscious mind shift or break down or become permeable. And much of the experience that the unconscious mind has always been experiencing is extremely nonlinear, extremely just out in left field, to the point where it's basically censored from conscious awareness as being irrelevant. But the fact is, it's not irrelevant. The fact is that it's profoundly juicy and meaningful, but not in ways that can be put into human terms, put into terms that make any kind of sense with any kind of consensus reality. So most people have more or less effectively cut off their awareness or self-censored their awareness of these dimensions of experience as being irrelevant. But in actual fact, there's literally no limit to, we're talking infinite dimensions. Each dimension is itself infinite, of just subtle characteristics that are actual, that are present, that are right here, right now. And just playing with that, just exploring that, you'll stumble onto it, you'll discover it, you'll it's like a floodgate. Once it starts to open, it cuts through, because you get the actuality of this stuff. And once your toes in that water, you can just wade on out and see what's there and just keep going. The trick is to be with it as it is. Don't let yourself fall into the trap of trying to characterize it, or map it, or integrate it with anything describable. Just totally let go and just.
My wife is a very lucky person. I've never met anybody who just has things happen for her. She, anything from losing her keys to, credit cards being left at, everything just sort of seems to work out. And I've come to the belief that she's, in some particular dimension, she's completely plugged in, has no clue why,
Sure.
or how it happens, but
Sure.
it just happens, and it happens so regularly that it's just sort of amazing.
Well, those kinds of things are that. I mean, basically all talent on any level,
Right.
any level of describability or non-describability is essentially this kind of a subtle energy functionality. Even consensus reality, acknowledgeable functionalities are actually subtle energy functionalities, because there is no actual consensus reality. There is no actual normalcy. There is no actual, world and all this kinds of stuff. It's all a gross misinterpretation of an inconceivable, hyperspatial, multidimensional actuality, which this is, which you are. And the way that it works and the way everything happens here in this is by its own self called direct energy engagement. And all of this is of the nature of talents, of the nature of karma, of the nature of, various, however you want to put it. But opening to this is part and parcel of unfoldment. And again, once you get that there's a there, there's no limits or no reason not to just have at it. The first step is the hardest in a sense. I mean, getting that there is a there, and it's not just fantasy, is kind of a major revelation. And you'll discover that there isn't like a little space that has limits. You'll discover that there is like, all of a sudden you're just in this openness of otherness, and there's no limits to how far you can go into it, or how subtly you can integrate with it, and so on and so forth.
So every departure into, or every recognition of some little tiny weirdness, is a door.
Yes, everyone's a door, and there's no limit to. There's no saying where, but that door leads to. You could say it's an open doorway.
Yeah, when you first said noticing, I think for the first time I saw it as just what the word seems to imply, but more and more I get the sense that there's just a zillion different ways of noticing. It's not just, sort of opening up your eyes.
Noticing is stepping through any experiential doorway. And you're not stepping through the doorway unless it's surprising and unexpected. I mean, that's the symptoms of noticing is a wow factor. When there's wow factor present, then that means noticing is you're on the threshold of noticing, so dive right in, or not. We build an imaginary construction of normalcy, of reality that we think we inhabit. And this is unenlightened life. But it's all imaginary. So all of these doorways, all of these potential noticings are just us looking through our own imagined limitations that are not actually even there. There's a wonderful old Renaissance era engraving or something. Well, we were playing with that a few years back. That shows some astrologer or sage of some kind. It shows the sort of the dome of heaven, the dome of the sky with stars on it, like it's a dome, and he's poking his head through it, looking out there, and there's all this weird, stuff out there, and that just so perfectly illustrates what this is about, because that's what's really going on. The normalcy is very heavy-handedly constructed by a process of fantasy and censorship. And when you begin to poke your head outside, when you begin to notice these cracks in the veneer of this constructed reality that we imagine we inhabit, you discover, wow, there's something there, and the there that's there is an awful lot like the here that's here, and what's up with that? And all of a sudden, all bets are off. And then this edifice that we seem to be trapped in, and also seems to be our imagined safety, or at least normalcy, reveals itself as completely imaginary. Completely imaginary. It was never there. We've always been this inconceivable.
I had this sort of interesting revelation. I was thinking about a dream that I had of playing with a little toddler kid and who didn't have a face. It was just all light coming out, And then I was thinking of that. That was a few years ago, but I was thinking of that whatever, from the very bottom of that light coming up, or whatever that is, to whatever I see, it's all my energy. It's like all me.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, this is you.
It's just like really weird to go, from the depths to the...
Yeah, absolutely.
To anything that happens.
Yeah.
It's totally that light coming out of the face. This is that light coming out of the face.
Yeah.
It just looks like this right now.
Exactly.
It's all totally that.
Yeah, exactly so.
Yeah, it's all totally...
This is your light show.
Yeah, it's kind of personal in a way.
It's absolutely personal.
Yeah.
It's literally you. You are this.
Yeah.
That's literally true.
Yeah. So it's funny because now if I'm sitting around in a situation, it's like, it's different. I mean, I'm like, oh, yeah, this is like totally me happening.
Experience is absolute intimacy.
Yeah, totally.
It's absolute engagement. If everything's in your experience, you are it.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard to be much more intimate than that.
Yeah, that's right. From the bottom, from the very bottom to the very, I mean, it's like,
yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, everywhere. Everywhere, anywhere, nowhere.
That's fun.
It's so easy to see what this is,
yeah.
But until you really get knocked upside the head with it, it's so hard to acknowledge because it's so radically, absolutely alien to any kind of human normalcy, any kind of normal human philosophy or normal human worldview. What's happening here is inconceivably weird from a human point of view. So it's very easy to see, and everyone's seeing it all the time. Everyone's seeing this weirdness all the time. But, people are so expert at discounting it as, oh boy, I really spaced out there, or, let me pay attention, let me get it together here and pull my, focus or whatever.
Right.
Because they can't access what they're seeing as it actually is, because it's so outside anything they imagine it could be. Right. And it is. It's outside. It's literally unimaginable.
Right.
So until you are prepared to be with the unimaginable in its own terms, you, or one, is going to keep interpreting it in your own terms, which will, of course, drag you away from what it as it actually is and deposit you firmly back into your fantasy.
Yeah, right.
This is so weird. It's so beyond any kind of human normalcy.
Right, yeah.
I mean, this is all you. I mean, how do you make sense of that in human terms? You're everything. I mean,
yeah.
What? What do you do with that? And yet it's the literal truth.
Right, yeah.
And seeing that in its own terms, it explains itself. It reveals itself. It's completely obvious.
Yeah, right. I mean, now that I see it, I mean, like, it's like, well, where did you think it came from?
Yeah, exactly.
Very good.
Yeah.
It was really funny too. I was at this party today, this post-wedding party for my nephew, and I saw my little brother talking to somebody, and I was like, who is he? Is that my child or something? Brother? For a minute, I couldn't remember, like I couldn't put all the family things.
Sure, yeah.
It was for a minute.
Welcome to old age.
I think it meant the Alzheimer's.
Welcome to reality. So you think you know who they are. That's right. They're all that.
Today I had the impression that, talking about the same stuff, that actually what we're seeing is a reflection in the mirror.
Yeah.
It looks real,
Sure.
but
Good.
everything about it is, it's not back to front, it's just not where you think it is, it's not what you think it is.
Right.
And
Where do you think?
I'm noticing,
That's a good one.
it's just noticing that you're seeing just a reflection of yourself.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's one way, one sort of way, let's say call it, characterize it as a way it can seem to be.
Yeah.
And aspects of that are that everything and anything that it presents experientially has literally infinite sort of other dimensions to it that may, well, I don't know how to put this, may not be obvious, let's say, and yet are obviously there, if you can have the wherewithal to notice that fact.
Yeah, but for me it was really the fact.
Like the dimensionality in a mirror. Like when you see a reflection in a mirror, you're seeing the reflection, but you're also seeing the fact that it is a reflection, which is somehow a whole different dimension to the dimension of just the thing you're seeing.
Exactly.
And it's like that. That's what I mean by an extra
It's the
dimensionality.
awareness of the reflection that was.
Yeah, which is like a whole other dimension of the phenomena, and yet included in the phenomena.
It is the phenomenon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I actually have a picture of that engraving somewhere on one of the pages of my website,
Yes.
now that I recall.
Do you have any?
I don't know. Till I was hacked by Al Qaeda.
Yes.
You words.
If you weren't before, you will be now, having passed out of those words. In a public setting.
When they do a search.
You're now on the NSA's list.
My value target.
Ixnay on the AAUK vertebrae.
You don't think they can speak from Big Latin, huh?
I won't go there.
Yeah.
He does seem suspicious. He has like a floating head picture. That's pretty suspicious.
Well, if it's not suspicious, why bother?
That's right.
Yeah, it's just endlessly weird what this is. Normalcy is not normal. Normalcy is absolutely inconceivable. And it's actually not that hard to see that very directly and to get how unutterably weird this is. Even as it is as normal as it ever was. It's not like normal, it gets erased, it's just that normal never was normal. And you can discover that fact and notice it with absolute self-verifying explicitness. It's just so obvious that this is inconceivably weird.
it's very interesting, Peter, the aspect of reality that it keeps attempting to kind of pin things down.
Yeah.
And, lately I've been noticing that, there are these sets of belief systems and interpretations that kind of exist within my thought space, and even within my body as a kind of definite entity. But, in looking into that, I see clearly that they don't, there is nothing there in the back. And so just to go to that, it's like, snapping the rubber band back to reality and realizing that this is all that is of any consequence. And so it just changes everything completely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this does. I mean, this is, Dean and I were talking about that earlier. One way to put that is this is intensely curious about itself, and all of this, what we call our experience, is it exercising its curiosity. And one aspect of the way that shows up is it trying to make sense of itself. Hence all of our modeling and interpretation and so on and so forth. But as it awakens to itself, as it develops some savvy and some sophistication and some subtlety, and beginning to appreciate how subtle it itself is, it begins to let go of those heavy-handed methods of analysis and learns to be with itself much more multidimensionally and fluidly. So rather than expecting to collapse anything down to coherence, it's able to be with itself, sort of with an absolute dynamism and an absolute flexibility. And yet, these old modes of trying to be more specific, trying to be more definite, trying to get more of a firm handle on things, persist as, they have echoes, they have sort of staying power, it's like when you take your foot off the gas pedal in a car, it doesn't just stop, it sort of keeps coasting. And so a lot of these sort of, in awakening, this is a really obvious phenomenon. A lot of our sort of, even as we sort of outgrow the cutting edge of our noticing, let's call it, is at a certain point, and we've outgrown certain more, more naive ways of being with our experience, and yet those modes still persist within our personality structure. And it's not a problem at all. It doesn't matter because they don't inhibit anything, but they're no longer particularly relevant because they aren't dealing with any of the good stuff. They aren't dealing with where your actual interest is, the actual envelope of your expansion is, the cutting edge.
Yeah, there's almost a reorientation of self-consciousness.
Yeah, exactly so. Exactly so.
That is more like real.
Yeah.
So
Really,
there are none of those attendant, strings attached.
Yeah. It reorients itself, but the old orientations, echoes of the old orientations are still there. So, so experientially or psychologically, it's a complex phenomenon. In realization, the unrealized personality doesn't just disappear, which is a very strange phenomenon. Because it's easy to have the fantasy, when I'm in realization, I'm going to be this amazing transcendental angel, and this piece of shit human being that I've been stuck being all my life is just going to suddenly go poof into a cloud of light. And in one sense, it kind of does, but in another sense, it very much doesn't. It's just as much here as it ever was. But at that point that it never actually was here.
Yeah.
So the fact that it is here as much here as it ever was, it has a whole new context to it, let's say. But it doesn't disappear.
Well, it's almost as if there's a reorientation around, all of those things have been there always, and it just is like which angle we're looking at.
Exactly so, yeah.
So it's sort of like reorienting to a different, frame of reference or whatever.
Yeah,
so
exactly
those other
so.
things don't disappear, but it's just easier to see that they don't have the hold.
Yeah, exactly so. They lose relevancy.
Uh-huh. And it's actually very freeing, to be able to walk into a room where you have this set experience of how things are and realize, like, oh, no.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, for sure. I mean, realization is discovering that normalcy is not normalcy, and yet it doesn't go away. It's just the same as it ever was, but it never was normalcy. But it still is right here. It's just the way it always was, and so it's very, strange and paradoxical.
It's so funny. It's just sort of like you go, well, how did I get to be God? Well, go figure. I mean, how is it that I'm the only one here? That's really wacko.
Yeah. And when you first discover that, especially if you're not in a supportive context, it's really easy to get a Jesus complex or something. It's like, oh my God, I'm God. All you people just, come on.
People are nothing.
You may kiss the foot.
Yeah, really.
But all of that, and it kind of makes sense in the context of, I'm God.
Yeah.
But that turns out to actually not be nothing special. That turns out to actually not have any. There's no implications to it.
Yeah, that's just.
It's the fact. Yeah, it's the fact, but there's no implication.
Yeah, right.
It's not a status thing.
No, I know.
It's not a superior or inferior thing. It's just that. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm everything. Yeah, and it's just completely self-evidently. But everything is everything, so that's not particularly special.
Yeah, right,
it's just,
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's a great chase. It's just an odd thing.
Yeah, it totally is. It couldn't be odder.
Erotic as a bed bug.
Yeah.
I would take a psychological test when I was a kid where it said, do you think that you're God? And I didn't know what it was talking about, but I knew I could sense that I definitely shouldn't check yes. They might be following up a bit more.
The straight people frown on that.
Yeah.
They think that's a problem for some strange reason.
Yeah. It's like a red flag.
Yeah. The stiffs think that means something weird.
Right.
And yet, I think from our earliest memories, I think all of us suspected it.
Of course, I mean, children know that. I mean, you've probably heard me say over and over again at different times, this wonderful quote from the Bible that has the ring of actually being a true quote or some semblance of it. Christ apparently saying, unless you become like a little child, you won't enter the kingdom of heaven. And this very precisely indicates exactly what you're talking about. Little children know they're the center of everything. Little children know it's all about them. Little children know the world revolves around them. And then there's this process of browbeating and brainwashing where that is literally beaten out of you, until you kind of knuckle under and adopt the lie that that's not true. And, discovering that naive inclusiveness, which we had, and in fact never have lost, even if it's sort of buried under layers of complication, is literally entering the kingdom of heaven, i.e. entering the transcendence that this actually intrinsically is. You don't need to make it heaven, it happens to be heaven. Fortunately. And how nice. How nice that this happens to actually be the way it is. How lucky.
In a way, it doesn't change a thing.
No, of course not.
It's all like you say. I mean, it's always been here.
Yeah.
It's always been the same.
It's always been completely obvious. We are the ones that dumb it down. I mean, obviously not intentionally, but nonetheless, it's always very obviously what it is.
It's a conspiracy.
sometimes I like to intentionally dumb it down just for fun.
Sure.
Seemingly recently. I don't know. I like to just pretend like things are human. It's almost like a funny reality check or something. Just to go, wow, that's really silly. I'm glad I don't have belief anymore.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. I spend a lot of times in just sort of human frameworks because it's fun.
Yeah.
You know, I spend a lot of time like
Fine.
sitting around reading novels and things, and I'm reading the novels very naively, the same way as I always did. You know, I mean, from that perspective, it's great. You know, but I'm not stuck in it.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, you can go into that mode, and that mode's not a problem when you're not stuck in it.
Right.
You know, if that's the only thing you have, then that can be a little pathetic. I mean, unbeknownst to you at the time, or maybe beknownst to you at the time.
This thing, yeah, I do the same. I'm, you know, well, I figured it out, so now I'll just read the internet.
Yeah, exactly, sure, right.
And so it's interesting because it's nice and it comes in these waves where you're like, I'm not really particularly paying attention to this whole like I'm everything thing, and
Yeah.
just kind of go around, and then it comes back to you again, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
all right, this is great, and it's
Well,
but it's always
never,
full force.
even when you are with it in lesser modes, it never goes away. You don't need to cling to it. You don't need to protect it or preserve it. It's just always there, and you never lose it, even if you're not particularly attending to it.
Yeah.
You don't need to. You know, like, oh yes, you know,
Grasping.
I'm infinite. I'm open. Like fuck it, you know. Go out and get drunk, or hang out with friends, or you know, get pissed off in traffic or something.
Yeah, it's the best. Total reality.
I'm also finding that questions are starting to go away.
Yeah.
They just sort of, I don't know if I should say that they resolve themselves, but they just sort of like vanish.
Yeah. But yeah, questions progressively reveal themselves as just irrelevant. Questions are irrelevant because they just, you know, the most that they do is look for answers, and you get an answer, and so what? You know, it's like,
yeah, right. Yeah.
It's just too. It doesn't actually add anything to have a question answered. You don't actually gain anything. It's just like playing a game. It's like when you're playing cards, you know, I put down a card and you put down a card. It's like, yeah, and here we still are.
But it's sometimes interesting to ask the question.
Oh, it can be great fun as an art form, but in terms of the urgency, you know, when you're sort of in seeking mode, there's a really eager thirst and what's the answer to this? What's the answer? Let me get the answer, because you know you think you're going to get something, but as you begin to see more and more directly what is, that there is no getting it and no losing it. The desperation just fades away, and then questioning if it persists at all is just an art form or an amusement, or you know. I mean, these talks that we do, you know, it's great fun, but it's basically just, it's like a poetry recital. It's not like it matters. Right?
Just throwing reality back at itself, just
Yeah.
playing catch with a wall or something.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
I think initially answers were pretty important.
Well, no, of
And
course.
but then I started to realize that there's 1,000 answers, there's a zillion answers, and none of them are right, and so it really sort of doesn't make a difference anyway. But then the questions started to become really sort of ethereal and transparent, and they just sort of they're vanishing. Sort of.
When you relate to your experience, when one relates to one's experience in terms of entities, in terms of things and conditions, there's a sort of a paradigm set up in the imagination that there's conditions and there's things to get and there's things to acquire and there's, so you're sort of, it's like it's like going to the store and getting something. You're getting something. You're gaining. You're acquiring.
Yeah.
And as you develop, spontaneously and just by direct engagement, develop a more mature intuition of what this is, you get that paradigm is not relevant. There's actually no gaining. Nothing is gainable. And nothing needs to be, not only is nothing gainable, but nothing needs to be gained. It's not like that. That's just not relevant. And so the whole mindset of that kind of acquisitive paradigm just, again, sort of loses relevancy. You go to sleep, you don't lose the world. You wake up, you don't gain the world. It's just, well, there it is. Okay, I didn't gain anything. And this sort of just becomes more and more intuitive, and you sort of settle more and more in the actuality of that. And that applies in intellectual gains as well. There's nothing actually to be gained conceptually. Except as an art form. If you want to study Sanskrit, you can, right? But you don't gain anything,
right?
Anything actual.
Yeah, I like the idea about an art firm, because otherwise I find myself, not that I don't think it's bad or anything, it's just, I don't have much to say. I'm pretty good at small talk these days, but anything sort of like serious, it's hard to sort of get involved quite so much.
Because there's nothing serious.
But you get good at pretending. It's like being a really good character actor.
Yeah, if you have, again, it's down to down to individual temperament. Everyone's a different sort of a bias of energy system and have different inclinations, and some people are more, whatever.
I've experienced that too, though, where people will have kind of a certain, belief of what a serious, interesting, serious thing is, and you're kind of looking at them like, what does it matter to me? What do I say? That's where I'm the same. I get it, the small talk.
Yeah.
Where it's, everything happens for a reason, and it's very poetic, and it's very beautiful, and I'm like, I don't even know what that means anymore.
Yeah, I guess if anything, I'm not quite so much interested in the topic so much anymore, but the fact that other people are taking things seriously, I think that's sort of interesting.
Yeah.
But where it goes, it doesn't go anywhere. You know what I mean?
It's kind of fun. You can kind of play it.
The phenomena of spirituality is fascinating, but it's also ultimately frustrating. Why is the vast majority of people so deluded? And why are they so ignorant of the fact that they're so deluded? And what's the mechanism of that, and how does that happen? And what's the mechanism of coming to realization, and how does that happen?
Yeah.
And that for a long time was of interest to me. But again, it's not. None of these questions are answerable.
And also, you get to the point where
it gets to the point where it's still the height of human endeavor, such as it is. But it's ultimately nothing at all.
Right. You get
Smoke
to
and mirrors.
where you get to where you think, well, what difference does it make? It's like when I talk to my daughters and I think to myself, well, they're finding their situation with work or their boyfriends, whatever it is, to be pertinent to how they're living their everyday life. And I play mom, and I play mom from the perspective of what this character has gone through and experienced, and
Yeah.
And it just, it's like, it's like being in a dance or on a
Yeah.
stage with other dancers, and you work off each other and you flow off each other, and it doesn't really matter, but it's beautiful too. There's a movement in it somehow.
I like that. More and more, I feel like I'm on a roll, and it's just best if I play this role out.
But I like my role, so to speak. I find it, it's its own energy of movement. It's part of all of this. It's part of reality. In other words, it happens to be this, but I don't know how to describe it. You know what I'm trying to say, Peter? It's like you have this.
No clue.
Clue?
But I don't know what anyone's trying to say, so that doesn't make it.
Well, the relationship.
I don't know what I'm trying to say.
The relationship with a partner, you don't know how it is that it happens, but you know that there's an enjoyment in it somehow. Nevertheless.
All these human dimensions of participation are aspects of this transcendence, but they aren't what they seem to be.
Right.
And every aspect of all of that is just endlessly weird in itself, which isn't particularly relevant because it applies across the board. So just things are the way they are, whatever that is, and there's no bias, there's no reason, there's nothing pro or con human modes of functioning and human modes of engagement anywhere, anywhere absolutely. And one gravitates towards whatever one gravitates towards, which is just of no consequence.
Yeah.
It's kind of like hooray for Hollywood. It's just what it is.
I mean, the content is completely meaningless.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's this. I don't know. Yeah, it's this thing. It's this thing that's. I don't know what that one.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
It's a thing, man. It's a thing. You know that thing it is? It's a thing, man.
I don't know.
Quit saying you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Compared to this.
Me too.
Well, just yesterday, I was in this dance workshop, and I mean, this happens a lot to me where it's just completely effortless. Like, I don't even know who was dancing. Like, I wasn't playing a role. It's just the role was happening, and I kind of like, oh, another day, another dance. It just doesn't seem like, because when there's a difference though between that and then getting stuck in this thing, this kind of role thing. I mean, it's so nasty when I have to try to play a role.
Oh yeah.
It's just like, ugh. I have to take a shower. It's like,
I feel dirty.
I feel so used, soiled, violated.
Oh my god.
Everybody just finds me constantly disappointing.
Oh.
You guys are having no fun at all, are you?
All the problems.
You are having no fun.
No, yeah, it is a lot of fun.
Peter, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the mobility of consciousness, what Leif was saying, that that it would become evident that you were everything and that you actually could move around into other people's minds because they're your minds. So.
Sure.
Okay.
What about it?
Is that a thing?
Often I feel that kind of happens. Like my face will have someone else's face, and I'll be looking out, and I know it's them, but it's me.
Mm-hmm.
So that can just sort of occur probably more than I'm aware of, because if I am everyone in the field, I could periodically just kind of merge.
Sure, but even qualifying it as that explicitly is heavy-handed, because there's no limit to, well, there's no limit to the way in which you participate with subtle energy. And it gets to a point where, after a certain point of qualifying, this is your energy, or this is my energy, or this is his energy, or something, is too heavy-handed, because it's more multidimensional than that. And yet, that doesn't invalidate the phenomena. And there's no limit to how much you can participate with subtle energy anywhere, whether it's interpersonally or in any way whatsoever, or with atoms, or with plants or animals, or with stars, or just with quarks, or with just transdimensional whatever. And it gets to the point where, very quickly it gets to the point where trying to qualify it as this or that, it just seemed to be as like a superficial aspect of it, which is so much more intrinsically than that. So that kind of qualification is sort of a little simplistic.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, there's absolutely no limit to the degree which you can participate with subtle energy.
Yeah.
But you know that. I mean, you know this. You do that all the time.
It
You're very sensitive.
It was another realization that I had about how normal isn't normal and how it shows up. And that was something I always noticed, because I would see someone else looking out of my eyes.
Yeah. I mean, and everyone's like that. Everyone is, swimming in a sea of subtle energy, and all interpersonal relationships are that. And everyone knows it, whether or not they let themselves recognize it consciously. I mean, you walk down the sidewalk and there's people around you, and they're like billboards just bombarding you with these different flavors, and you look at someone, you ew, across the road, across the street, or whatever. You know what I mean? I mean, that's being silly, but let's not being silly. But yeah, there's no, I mean, it's always been like that, and it's just really a matter of coming to be with it in the way that it is what it is, rather than being with it simplistically. But on every level, I mean, you can be with people's mentality, you can be with their physical energy, you can be with whatever. I mean, and and even separating that kind of discreetly in models is way too heavy-handed, because it's weirder than that. It's more multidimensional.
Well, I think it was the Leif's comment too, like, oh God, that's right, it's all me.
Yeah.
And I think there's some individual in front of me, and it's actually me.
Yeah.
And how similar everyone really is on this.
Well, they're similar, but they're also absolutely different.
Yeah, of course.
It's just, I was just thinking, and I can't read anybody's mind or anything, but it'd be great if I could, but no.
Come on, quit bullshitting.
Yeah, really.
We'll call you out.
Right. But I mean, it's just the fact of the light that's so mind blowing. It's just like, what the hell? I mean, you don't even have time to think of what anybody else is talking about. Like, hey, meet your new son-in-law. Okay, nice. But what the hell?
The radiance is everything, man. You just be with that radiance, and you're gone.
Yeah, right.
You're gone, and yet nothing goes away.
I don't even know, but I'm not even listening to him. I'm just like, yeah, nice to meet you. Okay. Whoa!
You're having some intense family relations.
And on that note, why don't we knock off for a break?
Yeah.
So online people will be back in about 10 or 15 minutes. God knows what.
Ladies and gentlemen, right away.
You threw a wild party.
Yeah. The guy's an animal.
Dishes here. Where are we going? All right.
Careful, 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 careful.
That's my fault. My bad.
It is, you're bad, you're
Sorry.
evil.
I'm
Paying
attention.
Yeah, we got it.
Architecture problem.
We got an apple here.
Oh, you're having fun then, right? Yeah, have some fun. And someone else is like, yeah. Yeah, right. No, I understand, right. That's the point, comes out, that's the point, that when we're not having any fun, we have to look at what we're having.
That's it too.
Nothing but dishes today. Shit.
You're not having fun, come hang out with us and you soon will.
That's right, come over to our house, we're having fun all the time.
Still not having fun, then you.
I don't mean us, I mean us. This crowd knows how to party.
There's nothing but fun, dude, there's nothing but fun. All right, some more clean stuff, clean. Woo, look at that necklace you got.
Thanks. It's a big old necklace.
Yummy.
I don't know where to put it.
Oh, yeah.
It's spiked too.
Peter, you want some of that pasta with the sausage thing, the leftovers?
To take home?
Yeah.
Well, I loved it. Sure, why not? A little bit would be great.
November 20.
Thank
When
you.
are you? November 20? Oh, I thought you were the same. I thought you were a Leo. No, girl, I didn't act that way.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know why I thought.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you were lying.
Yeah.
I lie a lot. You don't think you've been to it. I have two siblings that are Leo. One is July 29th. She just had her birthday. Then I have a brother who's August 15th. Same day as Suzanne. And, yeah, she's August 15, my brother's August 15, and one of his sisters-in-law is August 15. It's a popular day.
Oh, yeah?
You can have a party. When you're a winter birthday, parties aren't quite as much. I suppose. When you get bigger, when you get older, yes, that can be fun. Then you have indoor parties, right?
Springtime, whatever.
It'll be better even the next. I like it.
Jordan's never been there before.
Raw people. Well, if I never been, hey, well, everybody does raw. That's true. That's certainly.
Is there really anything
I'm really glad
You're not having fun, dude.
That's great.
Bullshit. Right? Am I right? Am I right?
You're right.
Oh, see? He says I'm right. Right.
Right.
I love that stuff out there.
Plastic bag? A plastic grocery bag or anything like
You're having too much fun.
Under the sink on the right, thank you. Yes.
You're looking at this all wrong.
I took the liberty of raiding the bar.
When he's doing a party, he's having fun with all his weird ass family relations. You should bring shit on there.
I'll do my best to remedy that problem.
Your kids have to do anything.
Just that kind of guy.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's out of my way.
That self-proclaimed famous girl.
Yeah, I love that.
No, we could have camera follow you around, you just like.
Is this designed to be
Someone funds me and I'll give it more money.
Yeah.
can show people the outrageous fashion.
Yeah.
On a budget.
Yeah.
so-
Outrageous
Outrageous
You know what, I'm gonna put it in the refrigerator.
Kings of Fashion. There's a place in the Mission called Kings of Fashion.
They're good.
No.
See?
It smells such bad.
Yeah,
not done yet.
it's amazing. All everything's around these days. Yeah, she was at lunch Friday. I guess we didn't show up. No, I figured, obviously.
So most psychotherapists would be nuts to be interesting.
You could do a blog.
Straightening out.
Start out with a blog and then have
From there, it's right there.
Just right there.
Just there.
They want.
You wearing those pants?
I was.
Well, there you go.
Sit down for a girl.
I got weird right
Do you have a
there.
new
Today,
engagement?
sitting on the little beach.
Yeah,
I was like, I should probably put sunscreen on.
Yeah,
I could have pulled it
That's
out.
great. That is great.
Even my
Because I
dad
think she's
did
been really busting her butt for a long
sunscreen.
time.
Dad.
It's got to be grueling being an older woman.
Relax about this.
I think it's Pecorino Romano. That's okay, take it home, take it home. Yeah, we got Pecorino Romano.
She's doing
We also have a ton of that.
Everywhere else.
What's your thought about Harvard? You thought it was impenetrable? Oh, it's so burnt.
Impenetrable. I know, it's horrible. It hurts right now. The gene is rubbing against the edge of it.
I know how.
Communications across quite
We are.
Like the one on my
That banana bread is good, huh? Oh my
I don't
God,
think
banana
it'll be
bread
quite
is
that way.
disappearing.
Jeremy, I think. Anyway, those lines are going away now.
Icing.
God, let's do it.
Oh, man.
Yep.
You're bad.
Where else would you? In the streets.
In a good sort of way. Oh, it's a good idea with blueberries on it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, dear. Look at how that last piece is so vertical.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's wild.
You kind of stood up at attention.
Very excited about its fate.
Oh,
Here's how good pie fate.
A little square. Oh, look at that. Good for walking. People think.
I have three foster sisters, but all the rest of my siblings were all sisters.
Probably gonna have wine.
Oh, God, I'm very clumsy.
It makes me hungry.
You're very biased.
These pants and this t-shirt are good for washing. So.
It's pretty interesting to see that
You
trend.
saw my daughter go listen to me one time. Sure, she was naked. She was living. Mom, I was giving me sleeves if they wanted me to do that. Oh, she goes like this. I know. I gotta watch this anyway, Mom.
It's
Why
sort of
why is like that?
Put a plant
My son used
tissue
to.
and they're all over. That's all the
Tom's hand in the face for the cover.
So that.
The what? The face what?
So that never
Oh, yeah.
change in people
Right.
who I've known my whole life.
Fine.
My son was dead.
Yeah.
He wiped it. And like that, right? I'd say, use your napkin. So he'd take his napkin and go.
He took his napkin and told me, yeah! That's even better, because it's like, all right.
Yeah, no, I.
Now, why do I do that, Dad? I don't understand. What's the napkin doing
The
there?
idea that I built it around.
Kids were something. Do you remember Artley's letter? Kids, Link's letter? And kids say the darndest things. Wasn't he the one?
Yeah, I wasn't much older than give myself, but they were little.
Yeah, because you're younger than I am. But the kids would all be sitting on the stage. Where were you born? Oh, you were? Yeah, I was right. If I'm gonna be 63 this year, when's your birthday? August what? Oh, you're a big Virgo. That explains a lot about you. I have a brother who's August 30. He's Virgo too. Not really. I don't know. Virgos are very particular. Virgo women and Virgo men are very different though. My eldest brother, who's my favorite sibling, he's a Virgo, August 30th. And his wife is August 27th. 8 years younger, but 27. And Virgos are interesting. Virgo men that I've ever known, they have a funny sense of humor, a funky sense of humor. They're fond of humor, and whatever brand is their favorite. Sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't get it. And it's like, what?
So I'm planning.
1945? 1950. November 12, November 20. On the cusp of Sagittarius.
I'm not sure. I mean,
Scorpio.
I'm here.
Yeah, you think?
I'm a sister.
You have what?
I'm a sister.
Oh, okay.
Scorpio women tend to be pretty obvious, I think.
Really? Well, it's a female sign, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Scorpio, I think women are more comfortable being Scorpios than men.
Scorpio men tend to be kind of confused.
Dude, for the past 30-some years, okay? Tell me about it. I don't know where you'd be without me. I have no idea where you'd be without me.
I'm so confused, I've gone through confusion to come out the other side.
Yeah, you're right.
He's 8 days older than me.
You're an elevator, right?
Well,
like in the Enneagram, you can be just a point, but you can also be.
He's a 5 on the Enneagram, dude. He's totally a 5 on the Enneagram, with a strong 4 wing, okay?
Like, how do
you think he got where he got? It wasn't for me, right?
Yeah,
Am I right or am I right? Absolutely. This is a yes man.
Tell me everything I knew.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Oh, now I'm locking him out.
Like, you know, when I was in school,
Oh, yeah.
that was pretty. He's from there.
There's a cider in the fridge if you'd like it.
What I said about Scorpio men, though, it's like their energy. It seems like it doesn't really fit with this society.
Right. Yeah. Scorpios tend to be either criminals or sex offenders or like Charlie Manson.
Not quite so extreme.
Or Dr. Johnson.
That's what I meant.
Figures.
Some people's personality side tend to fit with this weird Germanic culture we have pretty well. It's right in, people who are intense.
Yeah. Well, that's the one telling condition. Scorpios are intense.
And I'm not very clear.
Seems to fit better on women. Women tend to.
Yeah, because Scorpio is a female sign, so the way it's basically the water and earth signs are held to be female signs, and the fire and air signs are held to be masculine signs. Which basically means that the nature of their dominant flavor is consonant with that sort of gender. So like Scorpio, for example, is passionate, is emotional, is the way in which it's intense is sort of not masculinity implies sort of clarity and goal orientation and purposefulness, and Scorpio is very murky.
Yeah.
Which is more a sort of a female quality philosophically and not in fact.
Got my eye on you.
Yeah, it's like more expected, like a woman.
Yeah, I mean, classifying it as male or female is obviously kind of arbitrary and absurd. but it's,
So like in a Latin culture
relevant.
where there tends to be more of those things, wouldn't Scorpio be,
Saw your leopard shoes.
I've
seen
them.
Yeah,
in Latin culture.
I wonder, I don't know. I wonder about that.
They're very
Scorpio a water sign or
Yeah,
an air?
water.
eating off of it.
What
Off
is
of
yours?
what?
Earth.
Oh, yeah.
But Virgo is the least earthy earth
Right
sign.
there.
Yeah.
Because Virgo is held to be ruled by Mercury, so Virgos are very mercurial and fluid. Earth signs typically are sort of very, sort of locked in and not necessarily stuck, but, fixed. Whereas Virgo is very fluid and breathable and dynamic. Is it time? Okay, all right.
Come on, honey,
All right, let's see here. Okay, so we are back-ish. All right.
We're really here, right?
So we're back. We're recording. We're online.
Oh, really?
No.
What do you mean?
I'm totally offline. Okay. No, we don't. Logging failed. Oh, well.
Yeah, the one truly astounding fact is radiance, and as you begin to come to radiance, it shows up as this, that, or the other, and all these different modes, and all these sort of little revelations and profound insights. But when you begin to get radiance itself, and how across the board it is, and there's nothing but this astounding condition. It's literally this one transcendental light shining. And when you begin to be with that more and more directly, then that's it. And then all of these sub aspects of it are just come with, and aren't particularly important in themselves.
Mm.
But astoundingly, it's true. There's one fact here, and this fact is transcendental radiance. That's it. I mean, that's literally it. It's absolutely true that that's it, and there's no limit to how directly you can discover that is the case, that this is that you are that. It's like the common denominator. The more you're with the common denominator, the more how it just includes everything. So everything comes without being particularly important in itself. But as you come to it, as you go to it, its little guises are very juicy and very contentful. And it's like, oh yeah, this, oh that's amazing. Oh yeah, that's amazing. But then as you begin to settle into that common denominator, you just get, oh yes, that. And then all the little stuff, not that it's little stuff, but all the guises, the specifics, it's just sort of that comes with, and that's there, but it's just the radiance. They're the symptoms of this amazing positivity, this amazing shining forth. Real conversation starter.
How do we go from there?
Okay, I take it back.
Okay.
As it were. Screw radiance.
Screw radiance.
Fuck it, the highest mantra.
Yeah, right.
Screw radiance, drink beer.
Talk about something lighter.
Something lighter than
Something lighter, yeah. Good luck for that.
It's like everything and everyone is like this weird little cartoon character in your experience, and it can just like, I don't know, cartoons are hilarious because things can just suddenly become stretchy when they're not supposed to be. And they can like be lit on fire and then like be laughing like 10 minutes later, like there's still like this weird charred thing walking around. And it seems like such is the same thing in our reality. Like walking around, weird stuff happens. It's all totally flexible.
Yeah.
Everything's itself. There's really no like there seem to be rules, but they're really just totally fake.
Accidental.
Yeah.
Circumstantial evidence. Laws of physics. Yeah, right.
It's funny though, because you can still have a weird seeming attachment to those like kind of made up rules of how things go.
Absolutely.
Then you can have a hard time about it, and then it'll just be fine like a little while later. So cartoons.
And there's so many different modes of being with this, and being with it as, really structured and, ordered and cause and effect and all that is completely doable, and that's one of its modes. Being with it as just endlessly weird and flexible and unresolvable is doable, and that's one of its modes. And there's infinite, endless modes that you can sort of interface with this or be with this as presenting as if it was that. But none of these modes are actually definitive. None of them are inclusive. And yet they're all viable. They're all, they can look like that. You can be with it that way. But you don't need to be stuck in any particular mode. And that's the discovery. It's like, And ultimately you also discover it doesn't matter what mode you're in, so then you just sort of gravitate to whatever your temperament goes to. And it's like,
that's what I was just discovering recently is like there are 10 million new default modes that I'm finding, that's also a default mode because there's kind of everything sort of becomes another weird default mode and you can kind of go float between these things. And,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's sometimes it can be kind of annoying and sometimes it can be great. So it's like
the perversity of personality is funny. Why do I want to do that? Why do I always do that? Why am I this nerd?
They're all just different names for the same thing.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like totally boundless and funny.
Yeah, exactly. It's all these different modes that seem to be so different and so mutually exclusive. They're all just different email addresses of the same.
Right.
Different, right. Same spam company. Being spammed by the radiance.
Oh, dang it. Not that again.
That's pretty good. That is
It's a pretty good paradigm, actually. That kind of sums it up rather nicely. Life as junk mail. It kind of works.
But even with all of this, there seems to be some enduring witnessing of all of it that is incredibly profound.
Sure. But what it is a witnessing. It's witnessing itself. Its very nature, its very existence is a self-reflection. It's endlessly, intimately engaged with itself. And that's what this is.
I think when I first started in this business, a few decades ago, I thought that once one were to sort of achieve some sort of awakened state, that their what made them sort of distinctive would all get wiped away.
Right.
So that all Buddhists would be essentially the same.
You become plain vanilla.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not like that.
It's not
at
like
all.
that. At all.
No, not like that at all. I can't explain how that is, but it's very clear now.
Yeah.
I used to think vanilla wasn't a flavor. It's just white.
Delicious flavor.
Expensive of milk.
Delicious flavor.
Is that a political statement? Or
That's my politics.
Well, it wasn't chocolate.
It's gonna sound really insane, but that's fine.
That's right.
Well, I had to
You're in the right
preface it with
place.
that, but, like, whatever.
Right.
I like to drink a lot, and and that's not really news to my life past and whatever, but I've been experiencing this funny thing lately where suddenly there's no like actual boundary because there isn't, but it's just an interesting experience. There's no boundary between when you're sober towards when you're, totally intoxicated.
Right.
And so suddenly there's like this like it just somehow gets leveled off to where it almost feels the same until a certain point where you're like just gonna, you know, like fall over. It's like there's no distinguishing like point anymore. So
Right.
at one point, or at some points, I feel kind of like, oh, that's sort of dangerous. And then at other points, it totally doesn't matter. But it's just an odd,
Yeah.
you know, those like distinctions just sort of seem to go
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. Because you know, I mean, and you discover the same we'll call it phenomena with regard to all sorts of physical conditions and other conditions,
Yeah.
that they're relatively superficial. So being sober, being drunk is relatively superficial differentiations of something that is fundamentally way beyond that.
Right.
Being awake, being asleep is a relatively superficial distinction of something that's fundamentally way beyond that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so these distinctions, which superficially seem to be so drastically differentiable from each other, turn out to be like small, tiny little waves on a bottomlessly deep sea. And who gives a shit? Because it's just not particularly relevant. It's not particularly important. And they have a life of their own, and they stabilize themselves according to the karma, which again is doing itself. So it's not like it matters. You need to do anything about it. So you know, people that drink a lot, they may drink a lot. They may, you know, become an alcoholic and drink themselves to death, or they may, you know, drink a little less, or they may just drink a lot all the time, or they may, you know, do a 12-step thing and not stop drinking, and it's all of which is fine, but all of that is relatively superficial and is not particularly important.
Right.
But all the conditions of life, all the sort of the human conditions of life, are relatively superficial. You know, and as you settle into the actuality, then this becomes just really obvious. And so little things like health or sickness or life or death or waking or sleeping or you know, drug use or sobriety are just like, you know, they're just like these tiny little superficial nuances that don't really have much to do with anything.
Yeah.
They're sort of little karmic hiccups.
Seemingly, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, and when you live life, when you relate to gauging your reality by human normalcy, then these things seem to be major conditions.
Right.
You know, but as you begin to inhabit what this really is, then you get the true perspective, and you get that, well, these things are actual. They're just not particularly important, and they take care of themselves.
Yeah.
They have their own life. It's just all karmic conditions are basically like that. They're not, you know, they have their own life and they take care of themselves, and they have their own, you know, self-regulating kind of a trajectory.
Yeah. I found that increasingly with all kinds of different sort of feelings and
yeah, everything, all the human aspects, personality and functionality. You know, being functional versus being dysfunctional is not particularly important.
No.
It's relatively superficial. You know, being socially successful or being an asshole is not particularly significant. It really isn't.
Yeah.
You know, if you inhabit sort of the narrow bandwidths of a human framework, that seems like huge things, but in actuality, it's really trivial.
Yeah.
It's like whether you dreamed last night. You know, it's like who cares? And that's and so exactly. So the conditions that are happening in this waking life are exactly like that. It's just, well, yeah, sure, it happened to look like that today, or for the last month or year or decade or a lifetime.
Yeah.
But like, who gives a shit? You know, it's not. Nothing really hangs on it. It's just relatively superficial characteristics that they work themselves out. Like small ripples in a very big ocean.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's bullshit.
I like
that being a drunk or being a psychopath or being a mass murderer has a very profound effect. Whether it has an effect on your awareness is not the issue. The issue is having an effect upon the world around you.
Right.
And reality as you perceive it.
Right.
And I think that if you find somebody who is, let's say, a psychopath, their reality is colored by that. Mm-hmm. And it affects the way they see the world.
Well, absolutely.
And you seem to be dismissing that.
I'm not dismissing it. I'm just saying it's part and parcel of the flow of events. In other words, if I was a psychopath, and I'm not saying I'm not, so what? I mean, I would be a psychopath because I happen to be a psychopath because circumstances are such that I became a psychopath, and where I would go with that would be the following out of my circumstances. In other words, maybe I would discover I was a psychopath and go into therapy, or maybe I would become a mass murderer or whatever. You know, I mean, these things are actual, and they participate in the causal scheme of things, let's say. But there's no way to gauge what they are, what they mean, and I think a simplistic assessment of them in any terms is just that, simplistic.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
no
not
idea what they mean.
What?
Just having. It seemed to be that you were dismissing the results of being an alcoholic or a psychopath or a mass.
Well, what does dismissing mean? I mean, everything has its results, but those results are part of a stream of events that spreads out and includes inconceivable vastness.
That's true.
I think the thing that strikes me about it here is that when you say those kinds of things, you're saying them to a certain audience. And, you know, it would be difficult for me to imagine that a person who was just figuring out that they were an alcoholic would sit here and feel comfortable with that message.
I can understand that. I can understand a lot of people not feeling at all comfortable with it.
No, but what I'm saying is that the rhetoric, you know, the play, the things that delight this particular audience would not necessarily be healthful food for someone else.
Yes.
Or it might be.
I think that I don't say what I say because of its I'm not playing to a crowd. I'm saying what I think. I'm really being honest, you know. And I welcome and invite disagreement. I don't insist on people disagreeing with me or people seeing my point of view, but I am suggesting that it is, in my experience, a valuable point of view. Not in terms of the message about. I mean, to make this to make the content of what I'm trying to say about alcoholism or being a psychopath or something is missing the point. Although it does include that, you know, as well as everything else. I'm saying what I think, and I'm quite well aware that, you know, perhaps even the vast majority of people would either disagree with me or take it the wrong way, you know. But I say what I say for those that will find it useful, and I have no control over that. People that are saying very, you know, what I'm saying is actually ultimately altruistic. What I'm saying is truly ultimately altruistic. Yeah. I couldn't possibly be more altruistic. It may not sound like that in conventional terms, but in actuality it is. And if anyone doesn't see that or doesn't take it that way, that's absolutely fine. You know, and I would actually expect, arguably, a majority of people to not.
Most of them are here, probably.
Well, I mean, we're all painting our own rooms.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, you know,
sure.
You know, whatever it is that you see, whatever it is that you're experiencing, this is of your own doing.
Well, a simpler way to put it is, you are what you are, right, at a given moment. So let's say you're an alcoholic. Let's say there's a person who's an alcoholic. Okay, if that's a fact, it's a fact. Whatever that actually means, you know, that description means. What are they going to do with it? Well, they're going to do with it what they do with it. What does an alcoholic do with it? Well, you can go out and track, you know, 100,000 alcoholics and watch the trajectory of what happens with them. And, you know, some of them will go into treatment. Some of those people that go into treatment will relapse. Some of those people go into treatment and give up drinking. Others of them may continue drinking but not have it be particularly a problem. Others of them may drink themselves. I mean, in other words, there's individual trajectories which will occur. But it is a fact that there are people who could be described more or less accurately as being alcoholic, and that fact is what they have to work with. Mm-hmm. It's a reality. And that reality exists in the greater context of the reality of everything that they are.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, alcoholics are going to die. Non-alcoholics are going to die. What happens after you die? After you're dead, how relevant is it whether you were an alcoholic or not, whether you were a serial killer or not? And that may sound like a frivolous question, but it's not necessarily a frivolous question. And, you know, I leave that to the listener to explore these kinds of issues for themselves.
I think the greater thing that I was getting at was that there seem to be no distinctions anymore, which I don't want there to be like a sad time for anyone about like, oh, I have someone that's an alcoholic and I care about them, that's like the problem. I was more trying to address like the fact, because that seems to be an accessible task for me to ask Peter about, because it's a I don't know, it's more of a really like a line that people draw, like, you know, I'm sober, I'm not sober.
Yeah.
So for me, it's also the same of, you know, dreaming or
Right.
being awake, which I'm losing that distinction altogether.
Exactly.
I have times where I'm laying in bed and all of a sudden, you know, this weird other kind of visual thing comes and takes over, and it's kind of like, who knows what's going on anymore. Or maybe I'm on a run and I'm like, I'm breathing really hard, but I'm not tired or something. You know, it's just this distinctions sort of kind of fall away.
Yeah.
That's where more like I was getting at.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the way I would put that is that it is discoverable that let's call it karmic conditions are not particularly important. They take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And what is fundamentally happening here transcends those karmic conditions. It includes them and it generates them and it looks like the karmic conditions, but it transcends those karmic conditions. And I assert that as a very valuable and useful truth and a discoverable truth, which is not to invalidate karmic conditions. Karmic conditions do exist in the sense that they do exist. But they ultimately take care of themselves.
Yeah.
You know, everyone is what they are, and what they do with it is what they do with it, and they will succeed or fail at that to the extent they do, depending on how you want to qualify that. And all of that is a given. You know, so it's not a value judgment. It's really just being pragmatic, just observing that is the case.
Yeah.
And that's not particularly important. Nothing really hinges on that. There is something deeper that is, in other words, you know, the real, let's say, if you want to say the positive or the powerful point of this is you don't need to be a success to discover reality. You don't even need to be functional to discover reality. You don't need to not drink alcohol to discover reality, nor do you need to drink alcohol to discover reality. It's just irrelevant. And you cannot discover reality with clarity in any of those conditions also. So discovering reality is not dependent upon karmic conditions. I mean, this is the point. In other words, there is a fundamental actuality. It's an actuality. It's an actuality for you, for everyone, for anyone, that transcends their karmic conditions. So in that sense, and discovering that is a supremely powerful fact, powerful condition. It's an empowering condition. It's a liberating condition. It's a condition of well, I can't say enough about it. But the fact is that you know, reality is not dependent upon karma. Karma exists within reality, and karma does not hurt reality. Dysfunctionality does not hurt God. You know, alcoholism does not hurt God. And everyone and anyone is God, whether or not they're an alcoholic, whether or not they're a success or a failure, whether or not they're rich or poor, whether or not they're anything. It's just those conditions exist on a level of superficiality relative to the fundamental condition which obtains for everyone, anyone, any actuality, any reality, any real existence is this absolute fundamental bedrock transcendence, and that fact is not at all hindered or even impacted by the karmic conditions that seem to be appearing.
But I think
And this is not to say not to deal with karmic conditions. By all means, work with karma as much as we want. Try and be a success. By all means, try and be, straighten out your afflictions or your weaknesses. By all means, but from the bedrock spiritual point of view, nothing hinges on that.
But I think there's some concern generally among people that because of who and what you are, you end up hurting somebody. You either end up hurting yourself, you either end up hurting other people because you're an alcoholic, or because you act out, or because you're a pedophile.
But that's very simplistic. It's very simplistic and linear. Every action has unlimited consequences, positive or negative. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. I mean, that's way vast oversimplification. But the fact is that every and any event changes all the rest of the universe completely, everything, across the board, ubiquitously. So you help someone, you hurt someone else. It's fact. You hurt someone, you help someone else. You drive well, you're going to end up causing an accident somewhere. You drive crappily, you're going to end up making someone else drive better. I mean, again, all of these are stupid oversimplifications, but, it's easy to approach cause and effect in a sort of a moralistic, logical way of, try and be good, and that way only good repercussions will come from your actions. And I say that's bullshit.
Obviously.
It's a crock. You cannot predict what's going to happen.
I'm not arguing against you. I'm actually with you.
No, I'm not arguing. I'm making a point.
That's at hand.
Yeah, I'm making a point. Any action is like throwing a pebble into a puddle, and the ripples are going to spread out. They're going to go that way, but they're also going to come this way. They're just going to go everywhere.
Throwing of the pebble is a ripple.
Exactly, yeah. The throwing the pebble is itself a ripple. So there's this endless play of apparent cause and effect. There's this endless play of karma, and it all is impacting all of it. And you have serial killers and rapists and child molesters and Hitler and Jesus and the Pope and the Bushes and the 1% and the 99% and the alcoholics and the real do-gooders, nice people who you just love them. They're wonderful. They're sweethearts. Who doesn't like a nice person? They're there too. It's all happening. It's all happening at the zoo. And it's all doing itself, and it all impacts itself, and it all interacts. And there's no linearity in that interaction. There's no traceable trajectory where, these people are good, so there's good results happening. Mm-hmm. It's not like that. It's just plain not like that. And thinking that it's like that is overly simplistic.
Can I get back to that?
Of course.
I think that you're actually absolutely, I know you're absolutely correct. But what I heard from Gillian was the first stages of an alcoholic.
Right.
Justifying her alcoholism.
She may be an alcoholic.
Whether she is or not, that's my impression. It's nothing to do with Gillian.
Sure, absolutely.
And it seemed to me that you were condoning that behavior. Because it's just a little ripple and it's nothing really significant. Now,
from a spiritual point of view, I am.
I know that from a spiritual, but at the same time, you seemed to be condoning a potential alcoholic's behavior. And that is different from explaining the nature of reality.
No, because
I don't
totally
so.
get the nature of reality. That was just a point at which I was trying to.
No, whether or not she is an alcoholic, my condoning it may actually serve as a cause for her to improve her. I mean the point. That's a nitpicking. But
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, by all means, if it matters, work with it.
Right. Yeah, right.
But from a spiritual point of view, it truly doesn't matter. And in fact, being an alcoholic may be your path to salvation. Yes. One's path to salvation. I mean, you see that lots of times. Getting cancer may be like the best thing. You hear that again. Cancer survivors all time and time again. You see them say, "God, it was to change my life."
There's a lot of God talk and changing my life talk in AA.
Of course, all these kinds of things, and so it's completely unpredictable what these things are and what they lead to and where they go. And my point is not to condone something or to criticize something or to advocate social responsibility. I'm dealing with things purely from a spiritual point of view. which because the information about, but hey, go, friends don't let friends and go seek help and all that is out there. But what I'm trying to present is less out there, and I'm trying to get it out there. And I realize that out of context, it's. And I realize that out of context, it can be seem to be all sorts of things, but what it is and what it's intending to be and where it's coming from is, I think, valid, and I think it stands on its self-verifying in its accuracy.
Where are you drawing the line of what's spiritual? What do you
I'm not. I don't draw a line. Everything's spiritual. I didn't say anything spiritual. I'm saying.
From a spiritual point of view.
Well, the spiritual point of view means my point of view.
Context is imaginary.
Yeah.
And in that imagination, you can say anything. You can the whole world of judgment, good and bad, and levels and relationships appear.
Right.
But none of that happens here.
Yeah.
It's not here.
Right.
It's whatever's going.
No real human beings were harmed.
It's like this is infinitely too vivid, and it's going on. Too. It's like at closing time in the bar, where everybody's lit. Who knows what tender mercies are occurring.
Or at Sunday school, or anywhere.
Yeah.
It's like anything is what it is, and what that is wholly unpredictable and even wholly unknowable, even to the participants.
And wholly amazing.
And wholly amazing, and it's all part and parcel of a transcendental process, which is entirely beyond the scope of the superficial aspects of its apparent enactment. In other words, what's being done and what's being achieved by all of this sound and fury is inconceivable. And is not and is not analyzable on the level of the events, on the level of the apparent events.
So I'd like to try to speak to integration. The rhetoric of this group, is your rhetoric here, and the way that you speak of reality, and if ever any group member starts to speak in different language, it seems to me that they're shouted down, by the rest of the group, that there's this is the way it is, and it's this particular language, and and I hear that language, and I don't disagree with that language. The part that's interesting for me is that knowing maybe some of the stories of members of the group, a lot of us have been traveling a long time through a lot of different groups and a lot of different languages and a lot of different ideas, and we've tried on various different things along the way. And when one of your words is integration, and I just wonder about that in terms of the current rhetoric around it doesn't matter, and I feel like it actually does matter. I feel like that, some of the members of this group went through huge devotional periods of their life where they believed in their guru and they did this stuff. I think that mattered. I think that the people who went through AA, that it mattered to their trajectory of how they got here to be able to listen to this particular rhetoric and have it wake them up. So when you say it doesn't matter, I'm like, huh? How is that so? And then where's the integration around those different modalities of the crazy sphere?
Yeah. Well, I think that what I was talking about recently addresses that the way in which what happens matters is not accessible or addressable in terms of what it looks like. In other words, people go through these things and it takes them to where it takes them. Right? Okay, great. But it's not predictable and it's not linear, and you can't say, because this happened, that's a good thing, and it's, you can sort of, after the fact, you can look back and say, God, I got where I am by this happening, so they mattered to get me where I am, but I couldn't have predicted when I was doing them that was where it was going to lead me.
Right, I totally get that, but it's still an integration to honor all of those aspects.
All of the aspects, yes, all of the aspects, which means that anything that happens karmically is your process. Anything and everything. But the process shows up as the karma, but it's not happening on the level of the karma. The karma is more of a reflection of superficial aspects of it. And again, this language is very imprecise, so it's hard to say what I mean by that. In other words, you might say the events that are discussable, or even analyzable, or even thinkable in very vague terms, might be analogous to waves on the surface of the ocean, but there's lots of currents deep in the ocean and winds and all of that which have very little to do superficially with the waves, and yet are part and parcel of the waves being the way that they are. So it looks like the karma is a process that leads to where it leads to, but I'm saying that there's more than that. There's let's call it just transcendental or other dimensional aspects to things that are doing what they're doing and is completely inscrutable, and even if there's anything being done is debatable. So, which is for me an argument to appreciate the process, whatever it looks like. The process can look rough, it can look smooth, it can look good, it can look bad, it can look like going through hell, it can look like struggling with things, it can look like failure and succumbing to things, it can look like whatever it is, and it leads to what it leads to. But there's more going on that is inclusive of that is doing what it's doing, going where it's going, and that is ultimately, I'm asserting, a good thing, the good thing. And it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't make sense in terms of what things look like. Why should we have to go through these lives? Why should we have to go through all of this shit? Why should we have to, try and struggle being people and having all this weird stuff happen? It's an unanswerable question.
Sure, karma.
But the answer, the ultimate answer is, I would call it the radiance, or the will of God, or whatever, which is in my experience, an actuality. And the fact that that's an actuality is both amazing and astounding, and is the universal salve and medicine and unifying factor. It's a common denominator that makes it all make sense, even though none of it makes any sense. And it doesn't make sense, but nonetheless, in terms of it makes everything make sense. And I can't really be any more rational than that about it.
I don't think that takes, an example. If I was to become a homophobic nutcase and start killing homosexuals.
Sure, it happens.
It does happen. Would you not feel it in any way incumbent upon you to at least talk to me about that?
I might, but that wouldn't be from the point of view of your spiritual condition. That would be from the point of view. If you were that and you came to me for spiritual advice, I would give you spiritual advice, which wouldn't necessarily have to do with what you were doing by killing people.
But
and the advice I give you might actually lead to you not stopping killing people, or not.
But for instance, if I was in that situation, I would find myself wanting to encourage that person not to go around beating up.
Right. Sure.
Well, regardless of their spiritual life.
Whether it would do any good or
Whether it would do any good or not, I don't know. But it seemed to me in that situation that we started this whole thing, you were not doing that.
Well,
no, I wasn't. But I wasn't being. The question. I wasn't being.
If you want a drink, they say they'll take you to the bar and buy you another beer.
I wasn't being addressed in that kind of thing. If I was consulting with somebody and someone was asking me about, hey, what do you think I should do here? Then I might address it in those terms, as well as introducing a transcendental aspect to it. But this is being an invitational discussion group. And the level of the discussion was such that there were other dimensions to it that were being included in the discussion, and I was So I was dealing with it in those terms. But what I would do personally would very much depend on the context of how I was being consulted. I would be quite happy to work with a murderer and not necessarily urge him to stop murdering.
I understand that completely.
Or I might urge him to stop murdering, but it would depend on the level of the interaction. Because from a spiritual point of view, it doesn't matter whether they stop murdering. I mean, that's just a simple fact. From a human point of view, it's obnoxious, and I wish they would cut it out. And I sure as hell hope they don't kill me or any of my friends or any nice people. But good luck with that.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that you can ever separate the spiritual from the personal.
No, but there's no separation. It's a matter of context and artfulness. It's a matter of, I mean, working with people spiritually, part and parcel of it is intuiting where they're coming from and sort of where you can plug in with them most effectively. Yeah. And what happens is not necessarily exactly lining up with what it looks like either. You may be talking about something very superficial and have it be a very intimate and fundamental connection, or the contrary. Mm-hmm. You may have a superficial complete mismatch and still have something happen, or you may have nothing happen at all. You may just it's just like a fart in a hurricane, and there's it's an art form, and you just can't really know what.
With that fart, you just don't know.
That may do the trick. That may do the trick. Maybe that fart saves the world.
It's very hard to discuss any of this theoretically anyway.
Yeah, it's not theory.
It's sort of like what you say about death.
It's not about the words either.
The only time it's relevant is if you're dying.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's hard to sort of really throw it around.
Yeah.
I mean, you can throw it around as much as you want, but
in the mid '90s, towards the late '90s, as an academic, I began to see that all science was just empty, and it put me into just a really hopeless space. I felt like.
But he's going to say he had a period as a mass murderer.
Don't ask, don't tell.
So the story of Jonah.
We leave our crimes at the door.
So the story of Jonah. Jonah goes into the whale and he stays down there until he has lost all hope. And it's not until he's lost all hope that he finally gets to emerge. And that was sort of my life for about 10 years. I mean, I was completely hopeless. Nothing made sense at all. It was just a miserable experience. I mean, it's like nihilism and like to the nth degree. And I mean, nothing in my life is just hopeless. But I needed that to get to a beginning space where things started to make sense.
Sure.
I don't mean to say that that people should suffer, but bloody hell, it just seems like that's how it has to happen sometimes.
Well, it happens the way it happens, and it's unpredictable before the fact. Right. You can't know, you can't say, and you can't say linearly this leads to that. It's all just shit happens, and yet the shit happenings occasionally leads to realization, which from the spiritual point of view, i.e. the point of view of realization orientation, is interesting. But the interesting factor seems to be that even though the shit happens, and even though it's part and parcel of getting to realization, it's not particularly important which shit happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Being a serial killer may be what leads to realization. Being a do-gooder may be what doesn't, or not, or vice versa. Yeah.
I think that we're talking on two different planes here.
Well, exactly.
One thing we're trying to argue about the point of view of. I'm going to use words very loosely here, of God, and then the play on the stage. God doesn't care whether one star goes nova or not, and he doesn't care whether some
He's doing it.
Some priest, whether some
you want serial killers, he's fucking putting him out there.
God really doesn't care. But from the play on the stage, we have there's this part of the script as to this humanistic perspective of caring.
Sure.
whether a priest is a pedophile, but we don't care if a star somewhere else goes Nova, mind you. We really don't.
Right?
Because it doesn't supposedly affect us. Even though the priest being a pedophile is somewhere else in some other
Even though that star going
doesn't affect
Nova
us
may
in
have
a
kissed a
sense.
planet that has like a billion
But-
incredible evolved civilizations
But
on
for
it.
some of us in the play and in our script, it does matter to us.
Totally. And that's part of
So,
the play.
And all the, and to try and confuse those two ways of speaking or understanding is to be talking about apples and then oranges, and they don't have anything. They're different.
Right. Well, that's what I was.
Oh, even worse.
One, okay, there we go.
But it's even worse. It's even worse.
Okay,
No,
big deal.
it's worse than apples and oranges. It's like trying to compare a mineral to a child's foot. I mean, they're two different things. You're not, and so it's kind of a pointless. It's a pointless discussion.
Sure.
We look at it that
I'd
way.
like to,
All right.
play
All
with
right, Marcia.
All right.
Really hit it up.
The heavy hitters are stepping up.
It's getting really crazy.
It's a lively chat
It's really
today.
fun because this is being with, I haven't been around the group for a while, but being with Peter, actually the apples were oranges because I'm an environmental activist. I'm really active in things in life, and what Peter showed me from the very beginning was the radiance. So it gave me permission to be concerned
Sure.
and to speak up and to do something, because I know that every bit of that is this unspeakable radiance moving. So it's given me permission to continue being active and doing research and, saying this is wrong and this needs to be straightened out, because I know that is in itself a trajectory of the fractal infinite. So for me, it's all the same, and for John to speak up or Avia to speak up is actually that radiance.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's all the same. It's all the same. It's all the same.
So
And the serial killers and the child rapists and the activists and the 1% and Jesus Christ and Ramana Maharshi and Hitler, it's all the same. It's all just to show the radiance. And the radiance is doing what it's doing, and hallelujah. Just plain hallelujah.
yeah,
And that's kind of good news. That's kind of good news from my perspective.
It's given me more permission to be me. It's given me sort of more.
Yeah, by all means, be a good person. By all means, fight the good fight.
I'm not going to be this pious, non-dual person. I'm really active in the world, and I'm fucked up in a lot of ways. But I also see the radiance, but I don't always talk about it, and I don't always see it. But it's all included.
Yeah.
It's all included.
Absolutely.
Which is really beautiful.
Inclusive. Yeah. So high you can't go over it, so low you can't go under it, so wide you can't go around it, you gotta go into the door. It's the open doorway. This has been a paid political announcement.
I mean, so this is my thing too, is because, in a lot of ways, I'm becoming, I guess I'll wrap, let me look at the clock here.
Don't worry about that, it's my business.
Yeah, in a lot of ways I've seen boundaries fall off, and that's fine. And in other ways I've become more high-strung than I've ever been.
Sure.
So maybe I'll, I don't worry so much about myself, but I'll worry, a ton about anybody else. Like I'll worry about him, or I'll worry about my parents, and I'll worry about all these things. But what I'm doing, I don't really give a shit, because this is just more of my weird raw expression of reality. And it's the same, where maybe, someone else's, raw expression of themselves and them interacting with this all, that can be totally different than what I'm doing.
Well, it will be.
So
It will
activism
certainly
is
be.
so awesome. That's great. I'm glad someone's doing it, because I can't do it.
Sure.
I'm, doing some other thing.
Sure, exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's not that, you don't, it's not that you suddenly can stop caring about things, or it's not that anyone should stop caring. It's just,
Or if you were a person who didn't care, it's not like you should start caring.
Right.
Unless until you do.
Exactly, yeah. So.
And when you do get around to caring, you will.
Yeah.
If you never do, you won't.
Well, I throw my oar in that. It seems like the things that we care about are largely acculturated.
Yeah.
And that, so we can feel passionately this way or that way on an issue. but that's conditioned, and the fact that it's an apparitional radiance is indisputable.
Yeah, and that's why I call it karmic, because it's just part of the soup of the interaction of the milieu. You know, you are what you are because you are what you are, because everything is what it is, and here you are in it all, and it's making you be what you are, and that's actually okay, whatever it happens to look like at the particular moment of your analysis, and that is part and parcel of the process, which is fundamentally and intrinsically transcendental. And that's the news that I consider valuable. That's the news that I really am trying to convey, is that there's more, and that more is a hella good thing. Or at least a hella interesting thing. If it's not, if you can make up your own mind if it's good or not. It's sure like it's pretty far out. And on that note, with perfect timing, we bid our online audience good night, and we bid our